Okay, continuing with the series on British Armed Police, we're going to look at a book which is the history of London's armed police, and it was written by Robert W. Gould and Michael J. Waldren. And the book really is a history. It goes right from the beginning of the Metropolitan Police, how it started, what the sort of ramshackle weapons policies and equipment and so on, and the rather ad hoc method that firearms were deployed right through for many, many decades, and up to more modern times. So that is the discussion. And it also covers a lot of the shootings of police officers, the murders of police officers. The Craig and Bentley case, for example, is discussed, and some other outrageous murders are talked about, and it goes right up to when they formed a firearms training wing, which was D11, and the kind of training courses they put on, both on indoor ranges and at Lippett's Hill, which was the training centre there where they could do fieldcraft and so on. It was all revolver and shotgun. There was some rifle training as well. And there was, he mentions training for Special Branch, who were doing the protection role and that kind of thing. Another incident which is discussed in detail is the attack on Princess Anne in the Mall, and what happened with a protection officer. He had a Walther pistol, and he had a stoppage on it, and he was also wounded in one of his hands, so he basically was operating single-handed, and it was a bit of a disaster, and members of the public actually came to help. And it caused a revision in the firearms thinking, and they went to revolvers, basically Smith & Wesson snubbies for the protection role after that. But there is an argument that it was a procedural error, that they hadn't done the function checks on the weapons and that kind of thing. Also, the amount of training was farcical, really, by modern standards. Then into the era of modern terrorism. Back in the history, there's a big thing about what was called Fenian Terrorism, which was basically the IRA. It became the IRA. And there was a lot of arming of the police as a result of that. Also, the World War II, when they had to protect buildings and individuals and so on. Well, terrorism, you had the sieges, Spaghetti House, which went on for quite a while. It was in the papers all the time, on the TV. Balcombe Street, which is very interesting case. I was working down in London around that time, and what it was an IRA active service unit, were very, very active. They were going around, they were bombing buildings, places like the Hilton Hotel, restaurants, this kind of thing, following up with automatic weapons fire. And I was working on protection, and we were going to places that were attacked subsequently, or places we're supposed to go to were attacked. It was a terrible, tense situation, really unparalleled. And the gang, the gang of terrorists, the police put this massive operation where they flooded the West End of London with surveillance officers, and it was immediately leaked by a corrupt police officer to the press. So it didn't get immediate results, but after a while, things settled down, and they continued doing the surveillance, and the gang was spotted, chased, and they ran into a flat, a small apartment where Mr. and Mrs. Matthews lived, a middle-aged couple, and they took them hostage, and the police surrounded the building, and there was negotiations going on, and it was eventually resolved. So that was a famous one. Then the next big one was Prince's Gate, where the Special Air Service did their spectacular hostage rescue in London. A lot of the training that's talked about it in the book is 4-day courses, and that at the time that was thought of as being rather comprehensive. Nowadays, the courses for the highest level of firearms training is almost 4 months rather than 4 days. So that's the difference. The back then, the 70s, the 80s, and so on, police firearms training was pretty abysmal. It was the blind teaching the blind. They didn't really learn from outside much, and some of the other books we're going to talk about do reflect this. The guys at the sharp end do reflect this and talk about it. And it's only in more modern times that they really have a real surge of professionalism, both in the training and the selection and in the equipping of the firearms officers and teams. So today, particularly with the Met, the standard of the firearms command is very high. It's on a well level. One of the authors, Michael Waldren, is mentioned in one of the other books we'll be discussing. He was a senior officer, and his man management is called into question by one of the other books we'll be talking about. But it's an interesting history, and it's a good lead into some of the more modern books.